Okay, thanks everyone for really interesting conversations. Hopefully we can reflect some of the same sort of topics in this presentation. So as Aaron says, I'm here on behalf of both ourselves and FCDO Services. We formed an organisation called Team Cicero, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more later on, but it's all very relevant to the current topic. So if you don't know, FCDO Services provides services to all UK government departments. It already provides a paper sensitivity review managed service and redaction service. We deal with microfiche, microfilm, Hong Kong records and many other records at Hanslope Park, north of Milton Keynes in the UK. And we've now introduced a digital sensitivity review managed service, which is the kind of primary topic of today's talk. If anybody's not familiar, but it sounds like most of you are, so for our US colleagues, the TNA, the National Archives structure goes through this appraisal and selection, then sensitivity review step, this transfer process, and then a validation and ingest into the archive and made available through discovery to the kind of interested parties, interested community. So we're working across all of these sections. From appraisal and selection all the way through to transfer to the National Archives. And there's a number of areas where AI is very relevant to that. In particular, we started looking at sensitivity review, but then we had to move left to think about appraisal and selection, and really interesting conversation early on. What we found we needed to do is look at deduplication as an example, and think about exact, near and close duplicates. So we have had a really interesting job trying to define what's a duplicate and what's not a duplicate. So if its context is different, is it still a duplicate or not? We've had to make this so it's very visual as a solution, and then it could be easily kind of used by the kind of team that are more used to paper but have now transitioned brilliantly to deal with digital. We had to look at sensitivity review itself, as has already been talked about. The process control around that is really, really important, and we needed to focus on efficiency. So FCDO and now Treasury, HM Treasury that we're dealing with, and other government departments that we're talking to, have an absolute constraint. They do not want sensitive information being released. So there are always people in the loop. But what we need to do is use artificial intelligence here to improve the efficiency by pre-annotating the content with where we feel that there may be sensitive material in the records. And we've developed a whole bunch of tools, some of which are based on some of the same processes you've already talked about. And transfer, how do we actually package this stuff up in order to get it ready for transfer to the National Archives, including some complexities like metadata that exists in many of these digital records, etc. And of course, we've then discovered that there's a whole bunch of other topics, like how do you deal with the secure digital archive that results in that. So some material is not transferred to the National Archives, it's retained under the FOI Act and the PRA, the Public Records Act. And therefore, we need to be able to maintain access to that. And indeed, we'll put an access assistance in place that improve discovery of the content of the digital archives. We have to deal with referral, where government departments refer information to each other, and there's just a massive number of non-standard file types. So the National Archives now recognises over 1,000 digital file types. The most we've come across so far in a government department is 247. I dare say there are others out there, and so that's causing us a current challenge. Really importantly, this is a problem of people and technology and process. This is not just a process. It's not a digital problem per se. It's about the integration of these topics all together. The people are fundamental to the process, and Hanslope Park and FCDO Services have some amazing kind of history and knowledge about sensitivity identification, sensitivity review. And we found by going through this process that there's just a huge number of topics that are of relevance. These are all problems that we've hit. I could have done 2 or 3 slides like this, And when you actually try and implement a real system to do the sort of topics that we've been talking about so far today, you hit a whole number of other issues involving people and access and accessibility of those individuals, involving things like the number of records that you create that spawned from the start record, not just the metadata, but many other spawned records. So you create a bigger problem than the one you had to start with. Issues of quality control, configuration control of systems, and therefore you can't just go and buy a sensitivity identification system off the shelf. We've had to build the components, we've had to integrate it with people, and in order to make this a fully working system. Now, AI helps in a number of those areas. It can help with the big fives, the 5 V's of big data. It can help certainly with managing risk, particularly of the risk release of information. Duplication is an area of research and topic for us. Efficiency in how do I improve the efficiency of the process, because the volumes of digital records are increasing by orders of magnitude year on year. And interestingly, things like fatigue. So we're doing some research with Glasgow University and others around all of these topics at the moment. And we have a team, which I'll explain a bit in a minute. But one of the topics that's come up is how do we optimize the efficiency of the people? How do we make sure we don't give them over complex records? So things like fatigue is an area that AI can help with as well. So we formed a collaboration of companies that we lead. These on the left-hand side are the companies that are currently in the Team Cicero partnership, working closely with FCDO services. But we also recognise that we don't have all the answers, so we needed to reach out to other companies who've got novel ideas, and indeed other universities as well. We've already mentioned GATE, for instance, which is one of the things we were talking to Sheffield about. And a range of companies now formed something called a Cicero Trusted Community. And they're looking at, and we are funding with the support of FCDO and HMT methods and tools similar to the ones you've been talking about already today, to bring forward and connect into our solution. Now, we've very deliberately designed that to be modular, as already been talked about today, so that we can plug in algorithms and methods as they come forward, and we can try different combinations of methods as we go. And what we found is there is no single answer. You have to have different methods for different data sets and different combinations of rules and tools and AI and machine learning, very much so. We've created a bunch of tools to do that. This is just an example of a discovery engine. This is called OneView, which allows us to auto-curate unstructured data. We then have a curator who applies human curation on top of that discovered curation to allow us to structure that unstructured data. It will identify content, types, people and places using named entity recognition. Interestingly, we found NER is not terribly useful from a sensitivity identification perspective, but that's a whole other lecture and conversation and research discussion for another time. We also are able to identify potential sensitivities and sensitivity alerts, and then we push all of this data associated with the records, and this discovery tool will look at tens of thousands of records in parallel, push that into a database that then allows the sensitivity reviewers to know what all about that record set that they're looking at when they come to look at it. In essence, the way that works is OneView sits in the middle on the left-hand side, and just one of our tools, our suite of tools that we've deployed. That will look at undefined data and push proposed annotations, so sensitivities or duplications, into our record information database. And then the sensitivity reviewer, a person logs in, they look at a set of records from the RID with those proposed annotations. They'll correct them as they go, and then we look at the differences over on the right-hand side of the loop between what the sensitivity reviewer has actually said and what we've predicted. That allows us, with the help of our curator, to look at different rules and methods that would have worked, allows us to plug in different algorithms to say, well, could I have got better? Could I have got closer to what the humans have said, so that we can continuously improve and get closer and closer to a perfect result with different data sets. Now, we're not expecting to ever have a human out of the loop unless it's an exact duplicate, but we are and can get improving efficiency. So the curator is able to look at what's gone before, what is being identified, and really importantly here, talking about training sets, we've got a whole bunch of digital sensitivity reviewers who are really looking for doing selection, doing sensitivity identification, and we're then using all of that collective knowledge to feed into our engines to try and drive out an improving solution, plugging in different AI methods and machine learning methods as we go, coming from the Cicero trusted community on a continuous basis. And that allows us to annotate bottom right the records for the sensitivity reviewers. They can turn things on and off. And again, you get emergent properties when you do that, like they then get distracted and there's a risk that they'll miss other sensitivities as a result of the fact that they're then being predicted with some information. So we create emergent problems that we then have to solve by going through this sort of process. We've built a tool set that allows us to make sure the records are not modified and cannot be modified. They can only be annotated with potential sensitivities. And obviously then ultimately this is about redaction. And then in the top right hand corner is us doing a comparison of our predictions versus what the humans had said and improving over time with our accuracy through the portal that we built for sensitivity identification. As I mentioned at the start, part of this problem is we just received large data set from a government department. We have to do something with it. We have to structure it. So we've got the tool sets that allow us to do various things, including structuring into series through time by looking for date information, if it's not in the metadata, actually in the content of the records, and a process that allows us to kind of create a structure for record review and transfer of the record set. Now, a really interesting point relevant to today's conversation is around the technology tipping point. So we found at the moment rules are better than the machine learning for identifying sensitivities, where the curator is building rules, quite complex rules in many cases, learning from the kind of cognitive processing that the sensitivity reviewers themselves as humans are going through and trying to create and modify the rules as we go. In parallel, we're trying machine learning. We've plugged a different AI and machine learning algorithms together. We've tried them in combination with rules. We've tried unstructured and structured learning, and all of that information and research is going in to try and optimize the approaches. We've learned, for example, that for different exclusions based on the Public Records Act or Freedom of Information Act, you need to apply different methods. There isn't one solution for each particular type of exception, and so we're having to try different methods for each different element to try and optimize those. And there's a whole load of research that's going into this that's partly being funded by the government departments and with involvement from the universities, as I say. Now, one of the other problems that AI is helping us with a lot is a massive issue known as mosaicing, which is where the same born digital record can exist in multiple government departments. And of course, if they are then sensitivity reviewed in those different departments, which may happen, for example, if they've commented on somebody else's document, then you can have a situation where they're both transferred and suddenly become available to the public, but with different sensitivities, different redactions being applied to them. And therefore, by definition, somebody has released some sensitive content that wasn't intended. So we're exploring ways of counter mosaicing through a digital sensitivity review. And of course, we've got other issues like paper and digital, which exist as duplicates, so a hybrid data set, and looking at ways of using things like OCR to improve sensitivity identification in paper records, and whether or not you can identify kind of duplicates through that route and how accurate you can get. So all of this is real. It's a real system. It's about to deliver its first large-scale digital transfer to the National Archives. And it's been developed over about a 4-year period. And unsurprisingly, we're talking to a number of other government departments who are interested. And one of the things we find is that they're all different. Each department has different particular situations. How good or bad are they at understanding digital? How complex is the technology that's needed? Is machine learning or rules better for them? What security tiers are they dealing with? That changes the approach in a substantial way. Is it very high security, highly classified material or not? Volume, variety, what's their risk appetite? How willing are they to allow material that may be only just mildly sensitive to be released, in which case applying AI and machine learning to a greater extent becomes possible. And so we've been working with the government departments through an organisation called GCIM, the Government Knowledge and Information Management Network, to understand what the different situations are in the different government departments. So a very quick run through, given the time that we've got for today. Happy to take questions on that material. Thank you.